All right, part two, assembly for hard slab construction. So I have my template here and I taped it together to get an idea of shape. Now I need to take it apart. You might need to write what is what. Now I have damp leather hard clay. Don't cut to the edge because that tends to be really dry. You might need to smooth a little more depending on what kind of texture you do or don't want on your piece. And I'm going to lay out my pieces to cut and trace them, and I do want to put them as close to each other as possible so that I don't have to cut as many lines. So I'm not beveling yet. I think that's important to note. We will bevel in just a little bit. And I need a little more clay, so I ended up making another slab. I might want to save some of those little pieces for other stuff, which I'll show you later, but it's not like super critical. So some of these pieces I'm going to keep and I'm going to wrap them up, and I can use those for things like a relief later. So here's my other slab that I had made. And I'm going to wrap that up and keep it for potential use later. All right, remember beveling, this gives us a strongest joint because I'm creating more surface area. So now I want to bevel, and I'm going to start with the bottom, and I notice that it's tearing at the end as I cut, so I actually am going to cut in from both sides, so a little from one end from the right and one from the left, and that helps a little bit here. Then I want to use my kind of plastic card and smooth and adjust the angle. I'm only beveling the first three pieces, the bottom and two sides that are going to connect. And now I need to start assembling those. So I remember, score and slip is critical here, especially working with leather hard clay because it helps our pieces bond together. They will not stick together if I don't do this. And so I'm scoring fairly deeply, and I'm just adding water and scoring again to create my slip. Remember, slip is just liquid clay, so you can have a cup of slip around, but if you find that that doesn't work for you, just a bit of water works perfectly well. Now I want to press these pieces together, and so having these three pieces, the bottom and two sides, is going to give me some stability. So now I'm going to go back and bevel, score, and slip my next side. So remember, we're scoring both connection points, and we can put slip on just one point because it's a score-slip sort of sandwich. Now I want to use a coil of fresh clay, not any of the scraps because those are too dry, but a coil of fresh clay to score and lay into the interior where my seam is. I don't want to leave this task to the end. In this particular piece, I don't want to do that because it's so small I cannot reach inside later, but also just because you want to do it as you're going so you don't forget about it, and so that the clay can start to kind of homogenize so that the slightly damper coil can even out its drying with the leather hard clay. So I'm just going back in and smoothing it. It takes a little bit at a time. So I'm just pressing it down, and make sure that you're holding the outside so you don't press the coil on the inside and all of a sudden pop the wall off. Now I'm sort of pinching down along the edges and then sort of like smoothing down along the edges to reinforce that joint. You might want to use a plastic card on the inside. I found that wasn't super necessary. I'm actually not even going to see the inside here, so yes, it's important to smooth it together to compress it and give a strong joint, but it doesn't have to be perfectly neat and pretty if it is going to be a closed piece that you don't ever open, right? If it's not a box that is a lid, then, you know, not as big of a deal. All right, so then I'm going to kind of continue to compress and join this side on here. Now I need to add a little coil on the inside. And so as you can see, that is trickier, right? So I'm going to need to use that wooden modeling tool to reach inside. Now the top might need leveling. So I have a video, I'll put a link to it in the information, and you can watch that on how to level. It's for a cup, but you can use that application for anything. And I'm not going to worry too much here about the leveling. It's pretty close to level, and I can kind of adjust as needed as I keep going. So I'm putting the lid on, and I didn't bevel the lid, and you know, I don't have to quite as much because there's not a lot of external pressure on it, but it is not going to be quite as neat and tidy as if I did bevel it, which you will see in just a second. And so I need to fill in here a little bit. I just am actually going to put a little coil in there. Now I can neaten up the edges with my plastic card. Of course, if you have any like wooden tools or anything, like a wooden rib, that works as well. Remember, this is made while we're at home, and so that's, you know, using minimal tools. Do not forget the bottom because you want it to look neat at every single possible point. these are things that might be picked up, and so you want to make sure that it looks nice. I also might use a paddle to help compress and even out the sides. Just make sure that you're doing it kind of gently, lots of little taps instead of just 2 or 3 big ones that'll maybe pop things out. If it's closed, like this piece, I need to put an air hole in the bottom. This is critical, or else air cannot escape and it will pop off a side. Now, if you're making a lidded container, then that doesn't actually matter. All right, and so for this particular project, we were adding low relief surface, and so that means I'm actually going to use a slab that I reserved. It's still fairly wet leather hard. I rolled it a little bit to flatten it just a little more, and I cut out the shape, and then I'm using my fingers to smooth these edges. I want to do that before I attach it. Now I want to know where it's going, so I'm going to trace that location and score in that area. I'm scoring just a little bit below the line so I don't see all those score marks. And then of course I want to add slip. And it's super important here when I'm adding one big flat piece onto another, I don't want air pockets which will then pop apart. I want to roll from one side down to the other so that air gets kind of pressed out as I go. So I'm going to start with the biggest end, and as you can see, I'm sort of going to slowly go from one side to the other. And you can see here how my clay is still at that wet leather hard stage, right? It's holding its shape, but it is still nice and, slightly flexible. So you can add as much or little low relief as you want. And you could add more low relief on top. You could taper it. Don't let it be just a straight cut slab, right? Smooth it in some way, adjust it. Don't forget the bottoms. I might need to use a brush to reach inside there and hide any score marks that poked through. Finish that bottom, and then you're just going to continue working. Add to the surface and refine as you go.